That club you used to go to, Mario. You used to have 3 or 4 types of young ladies that you would like to intellectually have a dialogue with. But then that fourth one comes in and says, I speak with my mind and not with my mouth. Can you read me? And you have problems.
I like when they read with their mouth too.
See, I'm only telling you. You have to
was
adjust.
there in the clubs with his own chasing going on.
See, I've already volunteered all that, man. I've been to the place and places. So hey, look, I hope it ain't no good news. I just give because see, I got one. Until he gets ready to talk about this, I have something on your mind. I got to put this out in my mind. I just got to do this. The Bachelor show is really hot. They're not doing any commercials around it that deal with coronavirus. But I'm still trying to understand why 30 or 40 women congregate around one man. In an age where everybody goes like, well, wait a minute. Why are you making a show like that? Why does it have to be 30, 40 women? And they can't get enough. What's the secret?
I don't know. They willing to risk corona?
Seriously, you have to bring it back to that. I'm literally going like this. No matter how the times changed, if they congregate from one man, has anything changed? Okay, corona time.
As much as things change, as much as they seem to change, stay the same.
I'm waiting for that answer. Somebody hit me with it.
So everybody, put that answer along with any questions you have into the chat room now. We're going to be talking roughly about certain areas specifically to the coronavirus. One, sanitizers, whether or not they help, worth spending your money on. Travel. Should you travel? And what it means if you do travel. And also, we're going to talk about the testing, whether it's available, not available, and what it means. And also giving you the latest on the spread of a coronavirus around the world.
All right.
So the first thing is sanitizer. Like a bunch of things that are being chased down now, there's a run on hand sanitizer, just like there's a run on masks. And again, hand sanitizer, I think part of the issue with hand sanitizer is people kind of misunderstand how well it works. Okay, and one of the things that everyone knows in medicine is just regular hand washing appears to be one of the most important things. And when we say hand washing, they're talking about actually keeping your hands under the water for like half a minute or so, sudsing up the front, back, nails, all of that. And that's hand washing, not the hand washing so many of you do when you leave the toilet. This needs to be some real hand washing. But there have been some recommendations that have been posted out there by the CDC. What's amazing, some of the controversy has to do with, again, folks who disagree with the policies and sometimes who don't disagree by much. One of the things about the sanitizer, which was amazing, was that the CDC had recommended a mix of alcohol and other things. And when people started publishing, then there was some disagreement because the alcohol that was over the counter was 60% plus, and the CDC wanted you to have 70%.
Did they specify what type of alcohol?
Yes, they did. So all of that, and you could use the regular stuff. So again, sometimes information is not so helpful. In other words, whatever alcohol you can get, okay? And then the issue is, how well do any of these things work at all on decontaminating surfaces? One of the things that we did when I was an undergrad was we sterilized surfaces, then we did bacterial swabs of those surfaces in timely intervals to see at what point in time they would become recolonized with germs. And one of the things you realize is it doesn't take long. It actually has a lot to do with other factors in the room, like airflow, number of people. But you can imagine some of the surfaces that you guys so stringently disinfect may become contagious in an instant. If people come in, sneeze over them, do whatever they do, it may not last. Depends on what you're using. So it's not quite that simple. one of the things that I posted was I was trying to find it when they were talking about you could make your own sanitizer, and basically that was by using rubbing alcohol and some aloe vera. Again, the aloe vera is kind of optional, but again, the main thing was the alcohol. The additives are there, as you see fit. As you see fit.
Let me ask you something. Do you think with the advent of the coronavirus and what it's doing in this climate that our city will now become more clean if they start to do what they're doing in China? In other words, they're spraying, they're doing a lot of, will all of a sudden be a focus on trash and all that stuff, or will it be just, oh no, just spray this building because somebody was detected there? Will there be this, hey, look, we need to be as clean as possible, or that's just not relatable?
Good question. Not sure. I don't think so much, because as part of prevention of disease, it would of course be wonderful if everyone was living in uncrowded situations with plumbing, running water, toilets, all of that.
Right.
But since they are not, those things indirectly contribute to infection.
Right.
Okay. But it still has to do with how it interacts with those other things. Now, because I don't see society going out and using this as a reason to end homelessness, then I will simply say that I don't see how that's going to happen. The homeless population, like the poor, are mostly at risk because of their failure to access healthcare systems, and based upon living conditions. And so they may be more subject to exposure to other folks based on those living conditions. But I don't know. It may, if you're homeless living out in the boonies, in the woods off the grid, you might be better off because you're not exposed to people if you don't ever get it. But no, we don't know, Vic, and I've seen no signs at all. Well, the main thing, first of all, let's start it. There's been no signs of a national policy. One. Okay? And remember, to combat these kinds of things, you really need a national policy, a national effort that's coordinated nationally. Now, let me tell you this. Remember how difficult it was for them to coordinate Katrina?
Yep.
Houston?
Right.
Remember how difficult it was for them to coordinate that? Well, this is way bigger than that.
Yep. Yes, it is.
So, my point is that I don't see that they're going to handle it well. Right now, here in the U.S., I don't see that they're going to handle it well. For one, because in the U.S., response, and I said this again not yesterday, but Monday, I said response to these types of crises are politicized in this country. People will tell you who are in the healthcare career, who have healthcare careers, that we could never respond like this because there's not the will. In China, an authoritarian government stepped in, shut down a city 3 times the size of Los Angeles, and bust in 35,000 healthcare workers. Like I said on Monday, I don't think that they volunteered. I think they were told they had to go. And they told the people in the city, you can't go out, stay in your house, blah, blah, blah. They complied. So the authoritarian government in these kinds of instances do better. They've already had an issue here at home, Vic, where someone diagnosed with coronavirus just simply chose to ignore the advice. They were told to quarantine themselves. They decided they wanted to go hang out.
Which is kind of normal.
So, see, here in the United States, these issues have come up before with things like tuberculosis, leprosy, those kinds of things. And that sometimes, you go to criminal penalties for people. Remember, this was an issue with people who had AIDS and went about attempting to spread it to other folks. Those kinds of things. You have people who contract these diseases and then do everything they can to spread it to others. Part of the issue. So the U.S., as opposed to China, which everybody's given kudos for their response, the U.S., unlike China, has failed to respond. We did not have the tests. Part of the issue with the tests is they couldn't agree on what was a positive. The test had to be recalled. So there was problems with the bureaucracy of what equals a positive on the test. Now the test is supposed to be positive, but they have all these different people. Everybody can make a test. If you have any kind of a standing in the community of manufacturers or whatever, you can make a test and then submit the paperwork, I guess, to proof that it works afterwards. Okay? So some of the tests are not going to work. They're going to have to go through all the tests that are being developed by all these different sources and determine which ones are the best. And I can tell you from past efforts with other things, that's not as simple as it sounds. Okay? So, right now, testing is a big deal. Some people said, why don't we just go over there and get the test from the other people who have some? Like ask the Chinese. Can we have some of your tests? You know, a lot of people would love to extend a helping hand to the U.S. and say, we help the U.S. respond. But we don't want to ask. So, the whole issue with the test. Now, the test is supposed to be rolling out. Supposedly, let me just tell you what came out just today. Vice President Pence said every American could get a coronavirus test. Okay, and he was basically one who was just by asking. Coronavirus testing is offered with just a doctor's approval, the CDC says. Okay, so this is what they're saying. I don't believe them, but okay. They're saying coronavirus testing is offered with just a doctor's approval. And then, of course, as the doctor, we want to know what tests are you referring to that they get to have. So, this is what's being said out there. Now, again, the tests are coming from a variety of sources. So there's not going to be the standardization that you're used to for any of these tests in the beginning. Okay? So there isn't. So that's still an issue with the tests.
That's interesting. You know, I had an experience the other day, won't say where and when, but I was talking to a friend out at a social event. And he, you know, we hadn't seen each other for a while. He said, hey, man, what's up? Give it a dap. He was all suited and everything. And I said, hey, man, what's going on? And he proceeded to lean over as I was talking to him. And you know when a man is like, you know, he's talking to you and you like you're doing, but he's distracted. And he leaned over and said, man, I like that one right there with the hat. I said, oh. I said, okay, well, man, hey, what you waiting for? It's on you, man. Do your thing. Kept leaning over. About a minute or two later, he leaned back and says, man, I can't go over there. Why? She's coughing.
People paranoid.
I said, what?
People are paranoid.
Said, she's coughing, man. All right.
People are paranoid.
He was dead
and that's
sick.
the whole issue. Now, so we mentioned sanitizer. If you're going to obsess over that, I don't think you need to. I think good just hand washing. But if you do get rubbing alcohol, you can mix it with some other stuff for fragrance. You can deal with that. I told one of my friends who's kind of a nut.
Wow. Okay, wait a minute. I want the backstory.
No, I'm going. Some of y'all know you have nutty friends too.
Go ahead, man.
So she was like, well, Mario, how can I ever be sure? I said, well, how about this? You could put on disposable gloves when you leave the house. The gloves will remind you not to touch your face. And then have a trash can at the front door. So when you come home, you throw out the gloves and then go wash your hands anyway. So that's what I told him. Now, so you could do that. That's more effective than even the other stuff. You know, if you could just wear some gloves Now, and hopefully the gloves remind you not to touch your face, whatever you touch. And what, Vic? You have
Hey man,
you have a look like you may know this friend of which I'm talking.
No, see what you're doing. See what you're doing is this. You like to deliver messages where you make them feel a little small. See, you do.
No.
You take them through the process.
No.
Yes, you do, man.
What?
But let me say this: while you're taking through the process, it's just something popped up in my mind. I'm actually going, how many countries will not participate in this year's Olympics?
That's an evolving story, and I would put forward to you, no matter what anybody says right now, I don't care what any country says, take it with a grain of salt, because as things change, their positions will change. For example, if you have a very big epidemic, folks are not going to go to the Olympics, okay? They're not going to travel, which is the subject we're going to come up next. So a bunch of things will change, because you won't want to get in public groups of people where your chances of catching the virus are increased, both from just being there amongst them, with their own droplets and stuff, but also their touching of surfaces once again.
I guess soccer stadiums will be full as they play these competitions.
Nothing. No concerts. I wouldn't plan. Let me just tell you. It all has to do with how many people are getting it, how many people are getting sick. All of that is something that changes. Now, let me tell you why it's changing. Part of why it changes is because you have information being gathered all the time. Better information gathering, better reporting changes the outlook. A bunch of the places in the U.S., in other words, one of the questions they asked the other day at the press conference with Mike Pence was, how can you be sure of anything if you have no tests? And the doctor gave kind of a bullshit explanation. And the truth was, he can't tell anything. Until they test everybody is coming in with the symptoms, and even that only gives you a degree of accuracy. It's not 100% accuracy. You still speculate based on the people coming. Imagine if you're testing the people coming into the emergency room. That only indirectly tells you what's happening in the city. In order to know what's happening in the city, you would need to have to go out in the city and test people. So it doesn't work like that. So right now, Vic, it's not happening in the ways you think. So of course the numbers are going to change. So that's the first thing I got to tell you. You got to kind of get over that and try not to freak out. The numbers are going to go up. For sure. Now, they just declared a state of emergency here in California for like 6 cases. Now, let me tell you, people say, why emergency for 6 cases? Because medically, when you get 2 cases, you know how many other cases could be out there. See, when you catch 2 cases, the doctors don't think, well, we got both cases. They go like, who did these 2 people infect? How many more people are there? So that doesn't tell you. When you start looking more, you always find more cases. But you have to start looking. That means you need staff, investigators that are trained in this, to come to the area, interview people, do tests. You need a whole medical SWAT team to move in to do stuff. Are you getting that? No. That has to be coordinated nationally, and many of these agencies that do this have been gutted. They've been gutted. So the agencies don't have leadership, decisions aren't being made, and so far, the biggest problem that I have is that everywhere in the world, I trust no governments with reporting. Absolutely none, okay? And for every government is politicized, including of our own. And I don't trust our government's reporting. I don't trust our government's reporting. The idiots they have up there from the CDC talk like you have a tail. Okay? So they're already bullshitting you. They already started. We haven't even got into it. And the CDC is already bullshitting. Okay? Typical. So You can't trust any government's reporting, okay? And you also make sure you have some health care insurance because you're going to need possibly some care. Now, so that's the issue with testing. Tests are supposed to be here this week. Remember, the tests are from a variety of sources. Those tests have to be standardized, and the quality control has to be there. They're not doing that right at first because they need to test so bad. So, now let me talk about the influence on staffing, because this is also real too. People say, Mario, you're inflaming people. Well, see, what? Here's the way I look at it. If the truth inflames you, so be it. The truth is the way. Whether it inflames or hurts the flu, if the truth breaks your heart, get over it. Okay? I'm for the truth, period. Okay? So you may not like it, but get over it. Okay? So now here's the issue. In one of the hospitals where they had a positive coronavirus, that exposure led to over 100 staff people being sent home. That's always in the beginning. Later on, what's going to happen is you're going to need the health staff so bad, you're going to have them working either sick or when you're not sure, you're going to try to monitor them. But conceivably, you get to a place where you need people to work. Now, Vic mentioned this on Monday when we talked about the respirators or ventilators that could be necessary. Here in the U.S., they estimated, I never knew this figure, 75,000 ventilators. I don't know if that's just adults or what. They're estimating a need for 750,000 ventilators. Now, I ran ventilators for children and babies. I had trained in that at LA County Hospital. That's a narrow subgroup of doctors, okay? I would bet you that 10 out of 100 doctors can run a ventilator. It may be less than that. So the point I told Vic, I said, if you have 750,000 ventilators in operation, who's running that? Who's running that? You got one doctor for every 100 ventilators? Okay? It's going to be numbers like that. They don't have enough people. They would have to put me in charge of a floor of 100 ventilators. Okay? Running a staff of respiratory therapists and nurses and all that. So, there's a bunch of my co-workers who know. They know. There's not a 750,000 worth of doctors to run ventilators in the whole United States. They don't have them in the whole United States. I don't know if they have enough to bring in Canada, Guatemala, Mexico. I don't know if they have enough doctors to run 750,000 respirators, okay? So remember that. And they can't train them fast enough. What they're going to do is pay the students probably to come on and work on it. Okay? So, get ready. I'm telling you the reasonable things to get ready yourself. Be aware. Get into good hand washing. We talked about make sure you have some food stocks lined up in the house, at least a month's worth of food. Water, like Arrowhead, Sparklets, or any of those waters, and do it yourself. Get the bottles, bottle some water, put the caps on, store it away. Have 5 or 6 of those bottles stashed up. We're going to do the same thing. You got to have your water at home and be ready to deal with some of these things. Now, Mac is up there in Port Townsend. Seattle's having their own, see? But all the cities are going to, see, you guys, the biggest cities are going to have an outbreak because people travel there. Okay? Now, let me remind you some of the figures from 1918. Again, some people say, well, Mario, figures are kind of messing with my head. I said, well, I'm just trying to make you aware. Just like I had to make some of my friends aware of how many people die from the flu every year. I said, you may just be a little comfortable because you're not realizing how many people die every year. So the reason why there is a flu vaccine is because people are dying every year. So whether or not you trust the people, and again, that's another discussion, you may need some of these treatments. Now, in 1918 to 1919, you had an influenza pandemic. It's called a pandemic because it went all the way around the world. Okay, they had an estimated, and believe me not, 1/3 of the world's population, 1/3 of the world's population, or approximately 500 million people, were infected and had clinically apparent illness. So let me say that again. 1/3 of the world's population not only were infected, but appeared ill. Okay? 1/3 of the world's population. Now, the fatality rates were they said greater than 2.5%. Usually with the flu, it's less than 0.1%. Now, I don't know. Let's ask Alexa. Alexa, what's the world's population?
According to the U.S. Census Bureau, the world population today is approximately 7.63 billion.
7.63 billion. Okay. Wow. 7,063 millions. Okay, Alexa, what's...
I didn't catch that.
Alexa.
Please say that again.
Okay, wait a minute. Okay, let's be conservative, you guys. Let's not say 1/3 of the population gets it. Let's be conservative in this world. What number y'all want? 1/4 of the world population, 20%? Let's say 20%. Now let's be even conservative. 15%. Okay, Alexa, what's 15% of 7.63 billion?
15% of 7.63 billion is 1,144,500,000.
Okay, so 1,440,000,000. Okay, now, let's assume you have a death rate of 2.5%. Alexa, what's 2.5% of 1,440,000,000?
2.5% of 1.44 billion is 36 million.
So, if you have 15% of the world's population, as opposed to 1/3, as it was, okay, back in 1918, 1990, if the case fatality rate is like what they're quoting, you're going to have 36 billion people dead. Does that sound serious enough? 36 billion. Now, of course, a bunch more of those will be in undeveloped countries like Haiti, or places that are more rural. But that's what you're looking at in terms of right now. Now, the latest studies, by the way, is that they're actually saying that the virus is less lethal again.
Right.
Okay? But we still need to see what happens.
Well, at least I don't know if this is going to help anybody. I'm not sure if it's going to be a good thing or not. But in the Hubei province, which is the Wuhan territory, they can at least say, because they were getting 200 per day cases, and they have finally reached a point where they're now, the makeshift hospitals, one or two of them, are shutting down because the numbers are decreasing. So they reached their peak, and now their numbers are going down. It's a good sign for a place that gets the most every day.
Right, because everybody gets infected, and then, one of my nurse friends, Beth, she was mentioning we're all going to die. Beth, it's not that bad. Listen, remember, 97% of the people who get infected survive.
Right.
Okay? 97% survive. Okay? And we don't know what impact the vaccine will make, even though vaccines are never 100%. None of the flu vaccines are 100%. I think that I looked it up, and the average was about 60% efficacy for the flu. You can look that up too. The efficacy of flu, but efficacy of flu vaccine. And they'll point out to you how well it appears. Okay, the 2012 said they said it was effective. Now you see this is where you got to be careful with doctors. You need to define what effective is. See, because doctors they define all this. Oh, that doesn't equal effective, or that equals effective, because they define this. Okay, so a 2012 analysis found that flu vaccination was effective 67% of the time. The people that benefited the most were HIV positive adults, okay, because they ultimately, when you looked at it, the kind of protection they got. Healthy children, age 6 to 24 months, 66%. Healthy aged adults, 18 to 46, approximately 70%. Okay? So we not all good. So I'm not trying to get you to think about dying. I'm getting you to think about living. Get ready to do the basic things. Keep some water. Get your food. Basic things. I don't think you should be running out trying to buy a bunch of hand sanitizers or masks. You can make your own mask and wash them out in the washer every night, with your clothes. Okay? So I don't think, and then hand sanitizers, I'm not a biggie on that, but you certainly don't waste all that money. Make it yourself.
Right.
Make it yourself. And then wash your hands. And wash your hands appropriately. Take some time, soap and water, 30 seconds, front and back, scrub the nails. They want you to, I know you get under the nails. Never been much of an issue, so I always admit mine, but you're supposed to get under your nails to wash that too. Vic, what you've been hearing from people on the street in terms of your own friends, family, what are they telling you?
There is no, it's not the number one conversation because people kind of got it. They say you can easily go and search coronavirus update, and a lot of the information is just repetitive because it's the same every day. The only thing that changes is the number of cases rising. The solution has been the same. Don't run out and get a mask. Wash your hands. Wash your hands. And if possible, because you're going to do this with your children, will you take the first step to say, is it worth keeping my children away from schools or crowds?
Ooh,
so that
school is a big. We all know what school is, okay? Right. So, what kind of risk school is, okay?
So the people they're not really, they say you can't worry about it unless you're habitually doing something, and if you're few people say, hey, even if you travel, the same conditions. You just don't want to go into the lion's den. So it's not the conversation where everybody's going, oh, what the hell? Most of it is just, I'll look at it this way. Somebody can be over on the side in a room with you at a nice outdoor event, whatever, and start coughing, and you get the wrong idea, and they're coughing because they inhaled marijuana too hard.
Don't let them be Asian. Don't let them be Asian.
Well, see, this is what I'm saying.
That'll be double worse, right? They'll be like, "Oh my God, you're Chinese and you're coughing."
Well, and like anything else, I would say there's some people right now waiting for the first drug to hit the stock market so they can cash in. So you got people with different mindsets that's going to approach it differently, man.
Even though I think you would have drugs that will be helpful, to date, you have very little in the way of antiviral medication that has huge impacts.
Right.
Okay, so I don't know. I could take a look and tell you how effective Tamiflu, which was the other medicine they were using with the flu. Let me see. Let's see how much it helped Tamiflu. Because that was the medication that people were making a run on.
Right.
That's the one they want you to start within 40 hours, between 48 hours. So but what is the effect of this? Well, they say it can. This is what they're saying now. I'm just looking. If it's taken in the first 36 to 48 hours, it can decrease the duration of the illness by 30 to 40%. Okay? So if it's a 3-week illness, that would be significant. And it can decrease the severity about 40%.
Right.
But only if taken in the first 36 to 48 hours.
Right.
Now, you don't even know if that's going to work
No.
for the coronavirus.
No, they don't. Listen, they don't even know if the incubation period is 10 days or 3 weeks.
It's hard to know
they
that.
don't even know.
Most
So,
of the time, it's
yeah.
between those numbers. In other words,
Yeah.
that's the thing. We know from experience, chickenpox is usually 21 days. Other things are as short as 3 days, but some things we think of 2 weeks.
Right.
So, which is why when people get sick, I tell them all the time, you assume you got it last night because you did X, Y, Z.
Right.
Chances are you did not get it last night. You
Right.
at least got it some days ago, and maybe as much as 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
But at least it's some days, usually, that you've had these things before you get sick.
Right.
So that's part of the thing that people don't realize.
Yeah. And and if everybody wants to see it, everybody knows that most of the people who are unfortunately passing, most of them have preconditions. Most of them are elderly. The one that just passed on the cruise ship that caused the state of emergency alert in California was from a 71-year-old man who had the virus, who fell ill and died.
Well,
so, I mean, it goes to these preconditions in most cases.
It does, even though I must admit, now that I'm 63, the idea that I'm increasingly considered part of that group makes it no comfort. We have friends that are now our own age that have heart disease,
Right.
blood pressure, diabetes,
Right.
other illnesses. They're at risk. Just like the babies are always at risk.
Always.
To both the extremes of the spectrum,
Right.
those of us who did what I did had to take care of newborns or infants that ended up on ventilators
But
from these kinds of viruses.
true or false, there will be a treatment in at least 1 calendar year. True or false?
Okay, there's a treatment now.
Right. But you know what I'm talking
I don't
about.
know if it works.
No, the treatment that works.
Oh, I don't know.
More
Because
than a year.
even with working, now let me just say, remember I quoted you for Tamiflu.
I know.
It shortens your duration by 30 to 40% and your severity by 40%. Would you consider that good enough?
Nah.
If you could get the same thing in coronavirus, that it was like
That's not good enough.
40% less symptoms?
But you know what the livable condition is? It's like the cold and the flu. You're going to get it. We know how to treat it. We haven't been able to solve
Well,
it.
or not treat it.
Right, true.
Because the cold and flu,
Right.
it's all supportive again.
Right. So,
If you start having a really bad reaction to it, sometimes we use steroids or other things, which can also
Absolutely.
make the virus go worse.
True.
There's a bunch of these things you try. So we say, I don't know. When you mean effective treatment within a year.
yes.
Okay, so to me, effective treatment is mostly about vaccine. Mostly. In other words, most of these things you do better preventing people from getting it than treating them after they get it. You
Right.
do better just stopping them from getting it.
Right.
So you may have a vaccine in a year. It's going to take a while because you have to get the vaccine and you have to test the vaccine. And again, I just told you how the other ones work. There's not 100% efficacy.
All right. Another question. Will the U.S. peak out at 500,000 cases of coronavirus before there's a treatable vaccine?
All right, so we already said a vaccine that works a year
Right.
away.
Right.
So I can't remember. Alexa, what's the population of the United States? Again.
According to the CIA World Factbook, as of 2017, the population of the United States is 327 million people.
Okay, so 327 million people. So, wow. I'm going to look at what the other was just for a minute. SARS contagiousness. SARS contagious. Because he said 327 million.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I think you're going to have within a year a conservative estimate.
All right.
Okay, let me ask Alexa. Alexa, what percentage of the U.S. population contract flu every year?
Here's something I found on the web. According to yuki.edu, the Centers for Disease Control, CDC, estimates that every year 5 to 20% of the U.S. population contracts influenza.
So let's use that as a standard. See, he knows what I'm doing.
I know what you're doing.
So it says 5 to 20% of the U.S. contract influenza.
Right.
Let's assume 5 to 20% of the U.S. get coronavirus. Okay, so we could have did this.
Right.
So
When I say the year.
what's 20% of 326 million? Alexa, 20% of 326 million.
20% of 326 million is 65.2 million.
So that's how many people I expect to get coronavirus within a year. Within a year, that's what I expect.
And I kept it so low. I went 500,000, right?
That's way too low.
Right.
Now, and by the way, everybody notice how I made my decisions. I just looked up the relative rates of flu every year, 5 to 20% of the U.S. population. Okay? And I said, well, if Corona does about the same, 5 to 20%. So, Alexa, what's 5% of 326 million?
5% of 326 million is 16.3 million.
So that would be your low number. Your low number is 16 million people in the U.S. contract the disease. That's your low number. Okay? So I'm just using the way we would calculate it. It's straight numbers. You look at the degree, and if you have 16 million, Alexa, what is 3% of 16 million?
3% of 16 million is 480,000.
So 500,000 will die.
That's what I was thinking.
Will die.
All right. Got you.
Okay? All right?
All right.
That's what we're predicting. All right. So
And
that's part of the thing we're taking. So anyway, any questions you guys have, make sure you put them into the chat room. We are discussing the coronavirus, trying to give you real information. Again, my goal is not to spread fear, to spread awareness. And I have to do that by talking about the truth. If the truth scares you, then too bad. Get over it. You better learn to deal with the truth. So the truth is you need to get out there, okay, and prepare with some things. Now that leads us to the last topic that I had on this update, which has to do with my ongoing warnings of the what's there a word for this? The politicization of the coronavirus treatment, the coronavirus response. All of this is now being politicized. And it was inevitable. That is your biggest problem. I'll say it again. The biggest problem in the United States of America is your response to this disease is a political process. That means it's going to get held up and they're going to do it wrong. What do you mean, Mario? I told you they shut down a city 3 times the size of Los Angeles. Can you imagine them trying to do that here? People would just break the law. They would not cooperate. Okay? And then you're put in the position of, what do you do with those people who don't cooperate? If you announce a quarantine in L.A., clubs would still be open that weekend. Okay? Okay? Clubs will still be open. So what are you going to do when the people don't agree? So the problem in the United States is that in order to get any kind of a program, what typically happens is they get quote-unquote experts to prepare a report. to the House and the Senate. After they hear the report, they decide what they believe and what they want to do. You still got to hear the report. Have they called for the report yet? No, they haven't called for the report.
Nope.
Okay? And they haven't discussed the interventions, right? Now, Trump, because of who he is more likely to respond in an authoritarian way. Okay? Which probably is more correct. On the other hand, the electorate is not going to take well to that. Okay? This is one of those instances, I'm afraid, you guys, this is the way I see it. This is one of those instances where the medical community is going to have recommendations and the public is not going to want to go along with those recommendations. Okay? I'll say it again. I specifically expect that when it comes to this, Corona, it would have happened with other ones too had they gotten big enough. Okay? I specifically expect that it's going to spread and spread because of the political parties and their failure to respond. It's going to be like, I'll protect your rights. You don't want that to be forced to take that vaccine, and you don't want to be locked up in your house. This is just ridiculous. What about your rights? Your rights to get out and get a steak and go to the ball game. What about your rights? So that's what the politicians are going to say. You go, yeah, what about my rights? I'm tired of being locked up. Then you go run out and get coronavirus. Bring it back home to your family. Okay? So I'm just saying, in the United States of America, the problem, once again, is that your response to these diseases is a political process. And I don't know how to deal with that. See, theoretically, you would have planned for the worst scenarios ahead of time, had those protocols approved, so that when things like this occurred, action started immediately. That was bipartisan, non-politicized action based on protocols. That's what you want. That's not what's happening. So now you got Mike Pence giving press conferences with the doctors who kissing Trump's ass during the press conference and doing nothing to make people feel more confident. And they're really brushing aside all the serious questions. So now you have that. Your treatment lies in the hands of Donald Trump.
And the only time, when was the last time that there was a bipartisan agreement on an emergency level? Would that be 9/11?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is going to be a little bit different. Now let me just tell you, in terms of some of the efforts, they just approved $8 billion in emergency coronavirus funds.
Oh yeah.
$8 billion. Now what if I told you I thought it was going to be 100 times that or 50 times that? What if I told you $8 billion is a drop in the bucket? It's nothing.
Of course it's politicized. And the reason why it's politicized is because Trump will use it as a rescue mission. He's parlaying it. I'll give you this.
Well, he wants you to tell him how good he did fighting it.
Right. And then he'll say, I gave you more, and I gave you more. And then one day, I hope it's not true, but it may be, he'll be standing next to his group as he's telling you this, and somebody will start coughing and sweating, but don't have the coronavirus. And then watch the camera.
So let me reiterate. 97% of the people who contract the virus are going to survive. Okay. There are changing numbers for how lethal the virus is. Initially felt to be way less lethal than the flu. We have to see. That's to be determined. We mentioned about sanitizer. We don't think you should go out and waste money buying a bunch of these things. If you really want sanitizer, make it yourself. Get some disposable gloves, I guess. Because if it's really bad, you could always, like I tell people, you could put on the gloves, which will remind you not to touch your face, and you could throw them out when you return home. To me, I don't do any of that. But I'm just saying, if you want to be, I had friends who called me and they wanted to know what could they do, and I told them these are some of the things you can do. I would cancel all travel plans, even if you have a period of time when it gets warmer, where the coronavirus appears to be kind of dropping off. These things often have another period where they go bigger. That's what happened with the flu of 1918. It kind of went away at the initial point and then came back worse than ever. Okay? So we don't know that. So I would cancel travel plans. Now people say, well, let me say why. It's not just the travel of where you're going to, it's putting yourself in a closed environment with other people who may be sick. If you could be sure, or if you could trust that everybody getting on the plane is not contagious, then maybe that's it. Some places they're starting to screen the passengers before the plane. If they have enough tests, I guess that's possible. If they have a rapid test, a quick rapid test with reliability. But I doubt, even if they have that, that'll be 100%. So still getting on the plane in a closed group is going to be a risk. Consider the same thing when it comes to any public groups together, whether that be school, church, whatever. Consider that these things are going to be vehicles for spread. Okay? All right? Evaluate your choices for testing. Remember, I warned you that the tests that are being used today are being developed by a variety of sources because they're being done on an emergency basis. Some of those tests won't be good. Okay, so stay up on the tests, be aware, and if you're having symptoms, then get tested. But also if you're having symptoms, isolate yourself. Don't be like some of these other irresponsible idiots who, even after being diagnosed as positive, went out to hang out in the streets. And let me tell you, as a citizen of the United States, let me tell you, I'm going to challenge you at this point, and you're not going to like it. But you need to decide your opinion on what should be done with people who violate quarantine. And let's not make it for the ones who are vague and you don't know. Let's talk about the ones that we know are dripping wet with coronavirus, sick, positive, okay, and they want to go out and hang out at the Super Bowl or whatever, the Olympics. What do you think should be done with them? Is that part of their rights? Even though this has come up before, okay? You might want to look it up and see what was done before. But you need to decide as a U.S. citizen what you think should be done to the people who violate that quarantine. I wonder, Vic, you got any ideas what you think should be done with the quarantine violators?
Let me say this. If that's the case, there's a whole bunch of people who are already violating. I always say there's underreporting. I think they just know how to identify one or two and make it seem like that's the only one.
Well, what do you think should happen if a person is identified as specifically being one of the people who have the virus, is contagious, but is openly flaunting quarantine, saying, I will not cooperate, I won't do it, I won't do any of that?
You know, this reminds me of when the AIDS epidemic hit, when there was a lot of ignorance out there, and they had people out there who willingly was engaging in drug abuse, of course, and intimacy. And I didn't get to follow it to see what were the repercussions from that, because some went legal. So I would want to actually see some information so I can have some guidance before I just go, let me say this, because I know it's happened before.
Well, yeah, so the opinion is very simple. If someone has a contagious disease that's life-threatening, should there be repercussions for willingly spreading that disease?
It's just a matter of what.
Okay, because that's the part you're going to have to decide.
Yep.
Okay? It's what happens when people willingly are spreading this disease? What is the outcome for them? I can tell you what's happened in the past, even though I can tell you also that legally it takes way too long. They've had this before, where people are spreading tuberculosis and other things. But usually you have to go to court, get blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
In this kind of instance that we're talking about, you won't do that. But I can tell you this. If they have to institute martial law,
There you go.
then it's real simple.
Right. They'll already tell you what will be the consequences.
So you may want to get your opinion together before that happens.
Yep.
So that you could be known to have a specific opinion.
Yeah. There's precedence on this.
This has been Real Men Talk, talking about the coronavirus. We've been talking about hand sanitizers. We've been talking about travel, testing. We've been giving you an update on the virus as it goes and spreads throughout the world. And we'll be reporting on this probably weekly for a time. I'm Mario Hemsley, and this again is Real Men Talk.
Sipping and schmoozing, getting to know you one question at a time. Alright, sipping and schmoozing, talking about whatever it is we like. Politics, religion, the human condition, music and fiction, your new addiction. Sipping and schmoozing, getting to know you one question at a time. Alright, sipping and schmoozing, talking about whatever it is we like. Sipping and schmoozing, sipping and schmoozing, sipping and schmoozing.